Okay, maybe we'll start, and then as people come, they can join in. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're joining from. Know that there's lots of people all over the place joining these. So we just want to say welcome to another installment of our Black in Cancer Pipeline Program talk series. We are delighted and honoured that you would be here, that you would join us for this. So my name is Sigourney. I am the co-founder of Black in Cancer, and I'll be chairing today's panel session. So first of all, I would like to just introduce our incredible panel. So first of all, we have Dr. Saheli Sadanand. We also have Dr. Miguel Foronda and Dr. Sophie Danovi. So we want to thank you so much for being here today, for talking about your journey. So I don't know if one of you wants to talk and give us a bit of an intro as to who you are, what your job title is, and a bit of your journey to date.
Sure. Shall I go first?
You go first.
Sure.
We vote
Sorry,
for
I
you.
never should pick somebody.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, Sigourney, and thank you to the organisers for putting this together. We're all really excited to be here and to answer your questions about, working for nature and working in publishing. So my name is Sophie Danovi, and I'm a senior editor at Nature Genetics. I'm based in London. So we were asked to sort of give us a quick summary about our journey into publishing, and mine is maybe a little unconventional in that most editors will come into publishing after doing a PhD and then maybe one or sometimes two postdocs. And I got the first bit right. So I did a PhD, but realized that I didn't quite care for doing lab-based science. So I wasn't very good at mol bio, which is what my PhD was about. And I just didn't find the sort of bench aspects of doing research very satisfying and very in line with, the fact that I'm quite impatient and want things to happen straight away. And that just didn't align with research science at all. But an epiphany came for me when I did, when I started to write up my thesis, and I loved reading papers, and I loved, writing about science and putting different concepts together and reading around my subject, which is basically what happens when you're writing up. And so after that, I applied for a locum position, which was going at the time at Nature Reviews Cancer, and got it, which was super exciting. And then I did that for about a year. And then after that, I had my son, and I took 2 years out, which, meant that I was sort of re-entering the workplace as, having had 2 years off and not having any idea what to do. I felt I couldn't even spell my name properly at that point, but I got a job at a science communications team for Cancer Research UK, which is a big funder of cancer research in the UK. And I was there, did a few internal moves as well, moved to research funding as well. And I was there for a total of 7 years, after which time I was ready for a change. And a job at Nature Communications in their cancer genomics team came up. And I thought, well, that sounds like fun. I'd had some exposure to cancer genomics and evolution during my time at Cancer Research UK, and I applied and got it, which was super. And then after a year at NatureComms, I applied for an internal position it was a sideways move at Nature Genetics, which is where I've been now for 2 years. Sorry, was that over time? I apologize.
You're totally fine. We love an unconventional journey here, so yes, that's totally fine with us. Who wants to go next?
Go next, if Miguel's okay with it.
Yeah, totally fine.
So hi, I'm Saheli. I'm really excited to be here. Just like Safia said, we've been looking forward to this event for a while. I'm a senior editor at Nature Medicine, where I've been for almost my 4th year. I started in 2019. And my career journey is, I guess, maybe more stereotypical, more conventional in some ways. I handle immunology at Nature Medicine, and I got interested in immunology when I was an undergraduate. So I was actually getting my Bachelor of Science degree in biophysics and biochemistry. Please don't ask me about those topics, because I remember very little about both of them. But in the course of getting my degree, I took this class in immunology, and it's cheesy, but I fell in love with the subject. decided to pursue my PhD, and I stayed actually at Yale for my PhD after my undergraduate degree. And while I was there, I kind of, similar to a bit to Safia, I didn't find lab work itself, bench work, the most satisfying. I think I struggled with it in some ways and didn't feel maybe as supported as I could have been as a student. Probably could have also done some things differently on my end, but I really enjoyed science communication. I really enjoyed writing. I actually really enjoyed writing fellowship applications, which might sound strange, but I liked it. I liked being able to read papers and sort of synthesize ideas. I got involved in a couple of opportunities, both writing a science column for the newspaper on campus once a month. So I really enjoyed being able to have that outlet outside of lab that was very routine for me. And I got to write about all sorts of different things beyond immunology, which was fun. And I also got to work for a student-run biology and medicine journal on campus. So that's actually where I sort of started, in a sense, doing some editor work. And I was interested in being an editor, but after my PhD, kind of wanted to give lab work a sort of second chance. I didn't want to kind of, for myself, just personally, I felt like I needed to know whether it was just been a one-off bad experience or if there was something else I could get out of it. I moved up to Boston, where I did my postdoc at a place called the Reagan Institute, where I focused on human immunology. And I still pursued some communications opportunities there in terms of science teaching, actually. Thought I might go that route for a while. And as I was wrapping up my postdoc, I came across the opportunity to apply for a locum position, similar to what Safia did, but at Nature Biotechnology, one of our sister journals. And I applied a little bit on a whim, not thinking that I was necessarily the best fit, but thinking it was a good opportunity to learn something more about editorial work. It was temporary. If I was terrible at it, hopefully very little harm done. But if I enjoyed it, maybe it would be a stepping stone. And I was very fortunate to get the job, and it was an amazing experience. And it sort of led to me being able to apply for the current position I have. So I was at Nature Biotechnology for about 6 months in 2018. As I was wrapping up there, I applied for the position I now have at Nature Medicine. And I've been here since then, since beginning of 2019, where I mentioned immunology, but I also handle cancer immunotherapy papers. That's my cancer angle. I'm a little bit of a faux cancer. I never did cancer research prior to joining the journal. But it's been really fun to learn more about this area in particular. So hopefully I didn't go over time either.
No, you're totally fine. That's awesome. So exciting to hear just how you both were like, I'll give it a go. And like, that sounds really interesting. And it wasn't that somebody had gone, you'll be really good at this. It's always interesting to hear how people kind of fall into positions and think, I'll give it a go, and they see where they end up. Miguel.
Hey.
What was your journey like?
So yeah, that was great to hear. It's great to hear like so many common threads. I have to say my journey here has been driven by mostly two forces. One is mostly not knowing what to do with my life. The other one is being completely unfocused and interested in a huge breadth of things that weren't necessarily within my expertise during my PhD, during my postdoc, and foreseeable future. So I did my PhD in Spain in a lab that was working on telomere biology. And actually my project was more related to stem cell biology and aging and a little bit of cancers. So when I finished my PhD, I moved to Edinburgh in Scotland, and I joined, I'm an old man. So by that time, CRISPR was something mysterious and exciting. So I decided to join a lab that was, kind of like breaking into these areas in the field of stem cell differentiation. For personal reasons, I decided to wrap up and move to New York, where I did another postdoc that was more focused on understanding cancer from an organoids, but also engineering perspective. And I had the luck to have a really supportive supervisor that involved me in many different things. And I think by these kind of things I didn't like, for example, did I like being in the mouse room for a couple of hours a day? I didn't like that. Did I like cloning forever? It was very exciting to clone, and it was my thing. And I didn't see myself either, like applying for fellowships or mentoring people or becoming a PI. So I started exploring different things. And one of the things I did was actually join, a postdoc association here in the US. In which I was involved in career development. And there we did a lot of organizing round panels and discussions and inviting scientists and doing a little bit of, professional development as well, like courses and training. And it was actually, I loved it. And the other thing I did was also to join an initiative that actually started through Twitter in Spain that was, it's called Ciencia en el Parlamento, like science in the parliament. And, like several countries and continents have their own way of, providing scientific assessment to the government. Spain didn't have one. So there was a need to have a non-partisan advisory board, and it needed to be created from scratch. So I joined this, and it was super exciting as well. So I guess in that sense, this led me to, to realize that I actually liked discussing science and making sense of it and communicating it. So when this position in this new journal that didn't exist at the time opened, which is Nature Cancer, I decided to just apply and give it a go. So I guess this links back to Safia and Saheli. And it worked really well. I think we've had different experiences, like launching a journal from scratch is also like both challenging and extremely rewarding. And it comes with its own, say challenges. But it's been great so far. And yeah, I actually handle artificial intelligence, which I didn't necessarily do at all during my PhD or postdoc training, and clinical research and therapy papers. And we can talk about like how I got there. And that's my story.
Yeah, definitely that thread between all of you about just kind of giving it a go, which is, something that we'd probably encourage everybody on this call to do in terms of your career. Is you're interested in it, just give it a go, right? Just put yourself out there. So I guess you've mentioned what made you decide to kind of pursue a career as an editor. Like you've all kind of mentioned that you were all really interested and like just had this passion for scientific communication and getting that out to the public. Were there any other reasons why you were like, I think this might be what I want to do, whether that was kind of in your initial position or once you kind of really got grounded in what you're doing now?
So I think for me, one thing that I didn't enjoy during my time at the bench was there was a lot of, you spend a lot of your time wrapped up in the minutiae. So it's one protein, one pathway, sometimes one phosphorylation site. It was just very, very, fine detailed stuff. And whereas, and I didn't realize this at the time, but I think what drew me to Nature Reviews Cancer was that you have to zoom out, and all of a sudden there's no point specializing in any one thing. You have to know a bit about everything, which means you have to open yourself up to topics that you have never studied before, sometimes you've never heard before. And while that is absolutely terrifying, it's also quite invigorating. So I'd be curious to know what the other two think.
I agree. I actually think that's something similar to what I was going to say. Is I think for me, being so specialized in the lab, working on, in my case, like one cell type, essentially both my PhD and my postdoc, a cell type that I still love, even though it, didn't always treat me very well at the bench, but still, I think getting kind of wrapped up in all the minutiae, as Safia said, it was sort of draining. And I really felt like I had a lot of other interests within immunology and a lot of things I was intellectually curious about. And one of the things that I maybe didn't fully anticipate with this job, but I think it's sort of shown to be the case, is like, you learn something new every day. Every day we read either through reading papers and or through conversations with authors, we learn like lots of new things. And it's really, as Safia is saying, it is very invigorating. It's very exciting. And so I think that I was looking for something, didn't know that this would be the exact way to get to that, but I was definitely looking to get away from just one cell type, one set of, one kind of rotation of experiments I'd be doing, and not really feeling like I was moving anything anywhere. And I think it's satisfying with editorial work that you feel like you're moving something somewhere. You can see really a story from its concept, like from its beginning sometimes to all the way to the end, which I enjoy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's pretty much what I meant with the lack of focus. Like I found myself often just reading papers about like AI or I don't know, like recording in using CRISPR or in DNA. So I was like, this doesn't have to do anything. This is not productive. But actually, this is a way to actually canalize this energy, I would say, or this lack of focus into something productive. Also, I think one of the one of the perks of being an editorial is also like you're like what Shali was just mentioning, like you're ahead of everything else. You have the privilege to see science, like 1 or 2 years, even if it's before if it's publicly released. And I think that's super exciting. Also, it makes you feel great in having this privileged kind of information beforehand, and also having the the ability to actually influence a field and make it engage with a topic, and the authors that are really leading the field is really satisfying as well.
Yeah, that's an incredible point that you guys are 1 to 2 years ahead of all of the rest of us in knowing what the groundbreaking science is. You see what the curve is long before we envision it, and that must be an incredible place to be as an editor. So in that, what does your typical day look like? We assume that you just get a bunch of emails with a bunch of publications on your desk, but I'm sure it's more than just that. It's more than just reading, brand new manuscripts every day. So what does a typical day for you look like?
I guess I would say in some sense, I don't know that we have a sort of straightforward, each day is a little different. So I think it's a tough question, because I think certainly reading papers is part of most of our days, I think, and responding to emails. But, just as an example of something that we've all actually been involved with in our time as editors, we're all in a community, the cancer community of editors that spans across the nature research journals. And so we meet, that's not every day, but we meet once a month, and we have projects sometimes that we're actively involved in. So those can be taking up time independent of, kind of just reading papers and answering emails. And then we also attend conferences, which I think it's a little different in the last few years, unfortunately, because we can't really travel as much, but attending conferences, doing lab visits, at different institutes and universities. I think those sort of add a little bit more variety to our day than I certainly anticipated. I thought it was going to be just me sitting at a desk with printed out copies of papers. It's not quite like that, which is good.
Yeah.
I think one of the exciting things as well is we don't only read manuscripts, but we also think about, a broader topic or a broader field, and how is this developing, what exciting things are coming up, and then try to think about like commissioning reviews, perspectives, and comments, and this kind of like what we call front half part of the journal, which is, like more opinionated part of all journals. And I think being involved in this is also extremely, satisfying. Like you're actually, doing a broad search, learning what is the latest that has been published in a certain topic, and then trying to find someone that I can actually write very, concise, like give like strong insights into a certain idea, and see how this could move forward, provide a strong discussion. I think that's super, and engage also in this, try to develop this piece further with the authors. I think it's super satisfying as well. Yeah. One thing I like the most.
And I guess the other thing is that we're constantly horizon scanning, be that, speaking to authors about what they're interested in, looking at what other journals are publishing, just having general chats with someone. I think it's important for us to know what the scientific community is getting excited about. And that forms, a big part of what we're interested in. And so that's really fun, just, beginning to see trends and things like that is really nice. And, and I guess going back to, helping a community sort of direct a field is one of the most satisfying parts of the job.
Yeah, that sounds, I guess it's a highly influential position in science that people don't really think about, in, what comes forward to the front of a particular field really leads sometimes where everybody else decides to go, whether that's because of cutting edge technology, and all of those kinds of things. So when you think about, your journey to this point, what things do you think in terms of skills or talents, obviously apart from this broad interest, because that's obviously clear that all of you really have broad interest rather than, a tiny phosphorylation site on a protein. But what other things do you think are necessary to be successful as a journal editor?
I actually think one thing that I didn't appreciate as part of my training that has turned out to be very useful is presenting. like actually being able to communicate what the messages of the paper are. And that might sound odd, but we actually all in our respective journals present papers as they go through the review process to our colleagues. And it's either, I mean, oral presentations sometimes in the form of meetings with our journal teams, but also through written communication. And internally, we write notes and offer our thoughts and solicit feedback. So I think in a sense, those lab presentations we've all done where we, present updates on our research or even do journal clubs, right, as part of labs. There's actually a utility to all of that at this stage, because I feel like I talk a lot more now in some ways than I did to a relatively, big group of people, I guess, several times a week in a way that I wouldn't have anticipated. And I think being comfortable kind of talking about a paper is important, because when we care about the papers we're kind of taking forward in this process. I think that's something maybe I'm jumping the gun a bit, but it sometimes is a misconception that we really get excited about the research we want and that we are inviting in and that we read about and we want to publish it. So when we're presenting to our teammates, we're trying to convey what makes this paper a good fit for our journal. And we have teams that are very broad in interest. So it's important to be able to convey that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the other thing I would add is it helps to be decisive as an editor. So, an editor who can't make a decision I actually don't know how you get through your day. We make decisions all day, whether or not we want to send this paper out for review. Once we have the reports in, whether we want to reject the paper or ask the authors to revise it. I mean, all day, it's just decision making. And I think that you need to be able to make a decision, but a principled one that you can justify and communicate to the authors in a transparent way if they ask, which often they do. I think that's really important. And, just being confident and comfortable in your decision. And sometimes, you will look back and think, okay, well, that could have gone differently. But fundamentally, you've got to come down either, one way or the other.
How about having social skills? Like you're going to talk a lot with people. So you need to be actually loving this kind of interaction, like engaging into discussions and interacting with new people you haven't met, reaching out. So I think that's a big part of the job. And the other thing I would say, it's actually seeing the potential in a study. Like we don't see the studies as they're published. So you need to be able to see whether this can actually develop into something that is exciting and whether the idea is actually something, even if the level of development is not ideal, things can improve and do improve in revision. So I think having the ability to actually, project into what this can become, it's a big part of the job too, because that makes you identify the most exciting studies, I think.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. In being able to really understand how, having that foresight, but not just as a, person leading studies in your own field, but understanding and having foresight across a number of fields and bringing all of that information about what's at the edge of the field, what's coming, and how that fits into a whole bigger story around that whether that's a disease area or whatever. So in terms of challenges and obstacles that you guys have faced in terms of your career, do you feel like you have faced any? Do you think that there are more obstacles for people from particular backgrounds within the editorial field? What does that look like? And I guess one of the questions would be, what are Nature as a journaling group doing about those things?
I think I can start here. Maybe so as an immigrant in the US, I've had the traditional visa issues. So I came here with a J1 visa for training as a postdoc. When I changed jobs, actually I had to apply to a different type of visa because J1 doesn't cover editorial, for example, and it's linked to an institution. So when you change, you face this. It's an actual challenge. And for example, in my case, I had to actually go to London to get trained and to start my job while my visa application to the US was in process. And that's kind of like straining your family ties and it actually affects your personal life a lot. I have to say that the London experience was great, and I got to meet Safia, for example. She was my mentor there, which was great. But it's one of the challenges. if you don't have the appropriate certifications, you can't work in certain places. And even though Nature has offices globally, like for example, in Europe, in the UK, in the US, in China, this might be a constraint in trying to move out of academia if you don't have the right to work, for example. But there's ways to go around that, of course. And I'm here, so it can be done for sure.
What about you?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Safia.
No, I was going to say, what about you guys?
Go ahead, Saheli.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I think that this is a bit more, I guess, granular for me. One thing that I thought was a little bit of an obstacle, just on a more knowledge level, is just that, as I was mentioning earlier, I didn't have any cancer research training. And so I was sort of dropped in to this role that was very exciting. And I had to I was fortunate. I had a lot of colleagues who helped me out a great deal. So I don't feel it was ultimately, I don't know if obstacle is the right word, but it was a challenge because I felt that, in handling a field that was very fast moving in immunotherapy and not knowing a lot about the field going in, I didn't want to kind of come off as ignorant when I spoke with authors. As Miguel said, a lot of what we do is conversing with people, and you do need to enjoy that. But certainly when I started out, the first few conferences I went to, I was so nervous to ask the wrong questions. And, I think that's probably a natural feeling. I'm guessing a lot of us have that. But one of the things that's great about the job, but is also a challenge, that you will be learning about areas that I think we've all mentioned that you weren't necessarily well versed in to start with. And I think you have to sort of be ready to educate yourself in a pretty rapid fashion. And some of that comes through trial and error of reading papers and maybe talking to people. And some of it just comes from taking chances and not feeling like that you're asking the stupid question, because as we know, there's no stupid question.
Yeah, I think my experience is fairly similar. A lot of my obstacles, I guess challenges is a better word for them, were, I would say, more in my head than actual challenges. So I think, when I came back from maternity leave after 2 years off, I was terrified of applying for anything. I just felt like a complete moron, that I didn't know anything, that I'd forgotten everything, that I had nothing to offer. The thought of applying for jobs where I had no formal training, which is basically of a current theme throughout my career, actually, has always been a barrier. And if I look back, there are so many times when I think, oh my God, I so nearly didn't apply for that because I didn't think that I was good enough, or I didn't think I was qualified enough, or and I think the moral of the story now is, it's less about what you can do, it's more about the way you can think, I think, certainly with editorial. So I'm also not a geneticist. I mean, I work for Nature Genetics, but I'm not a geneticist. But you pick things up really, really quickly. That is a massive challenge. And on top of that, I have expertise in cancer, but Nature Genetics is a broad journal, and occasionally I'll be thrown a flute genome, which is terrifying, but it's, again, really fun. And it's just about overcoming that sort of initial fear and saying, actually, I can do this, it will be fine. And even if I struggle, we have a wonderful community. Your colleagues within your journal are amazing, and the broader sort of cancer editing community is fantastic as well. So there's a lot of support for those moments when you think everything is terrible.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really, really good to hear. So when it comes to the everyday, what are the kind of misconceptions? I mean, we've mentioned one already, and that you're not sat down all day reading publications, although that is a major part of your job. What other misconceptions are there about being an editor of a journal? Whether that's from just a researcher's perspective, or any number of perspectives of people who ask you about what your job is like.
I've had several people reaching out and say like, oh, I'm interested in editorial positions because I love writing. And I'm like, well, if you love writing emails, that's correct. I mean, and we do actually do some writing. We're involved in writing editorials, for example, but the editor's work, I think it's, as the name says, it's like mostly reading about others and trying to make it better, or like the best by editing and by improving it. And there's a lot of, like making decisions about like the scope and whether it fits in your journal, whether it's something that things that we've discussed already. But I think this is a big something that's common, let's say, because I got it quite often.
And I guess kind of as a corollary to that we do a lot of copy editing as editors, which, we have actually we have copy editors that work on our papers once they're accepted and clean up all the, look for the grammar mistakes, check for typos, all that kind of stuff. It's not that maybe we pick up on some of those things as we go through the process with the paper, but it's actually not our primary job to do that level of editing.
Yeah.
And probably, I think we'd all agree that none of us would be perfect at that anyways. You need a really trained eye to do something like that. So I think that's another misconception, that people think that we're like just going through each paper and like literally, line by line, fixing every style issue or every grammar issue.
Yeah.
We don't do a lot of that either at the end stage of a paper's, kind of life with us. We're sort of getting it to the point where it's ready to be accepted and accepting it, and then letting it sort of be taken from there with the next part of our production process.
Yeah, and I think I agree with all those points. I think another misconception I hear or feel people have about us is that we enjoy rejecting papers, which is actually the worst part of the job. It's the worst part of the job. The best part of the job is accepting a paper or getting a wonderful crop of reviews for a paper that you've got a real soft spot for, or having a really productive conversation with an author about how to turn their paper around. We get, and I think Saheli mentioned this earlier, we actually get very attached to our papers, sometimes unreasonably so. And and I think that's a good thing. So we don't enjoy, we derive no pleasure from rejecting papers, and we do read the papers. We read them thoroughly. We don't, I think another misconception people have is that we just sort of skim read the abstract, but no. We'll read everything. We'll read it thoroughly. Sometimes we'll read it more than once and then discuss it with our colleagues. So we have read it.
I agree, and one can never get used to rejection. I think it hurts every time, every single time. It's tough.
Yeah.
Just so related to that too, one thing that I think with rejecting papers that maybe people might not know is that because we speak for a team, when you get a decision letter from one of us, we're representing our teams. It's not just it's the team, sort of decision. We're just the ones, we're the messengers. We've discussed the paper, we've, presented it, over the course of its sort of span with us as a journal. But there are papers, as Safia said, that we get attached to, and I may really love it a lot and I see some potential, but I have to eventually consider both the reviews and the feedback from my colleagues. It's a team decision with papers. And I think that can be hard because it's not that we're individually going after a paper. It's different people can have reasonable differences of opinion on how a paper fits within our journal scope and kind of future. And we all serve broad audiences. So we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think it's good for people to hear that. And I suppose that allows you to take it a little less personally, even if it is hurt, like it hurts, and you're right, rejection hurts, but it's good to know that it's not just one person looking at it and going, I don't really like that topic, or I'm not really interested in what your lab is doing. So for those who are interested in having a career in editing, where do you see the field heading, especially in the context of where social media is going, and people connecting in terms of publications globally, and the need to communicate our research not just to academics but also just to the general public, because we've seen certainly over the last 2 years the importance of good scientific communication, and not just throwing information out there, but making sure that it's really well written and curated for the populations that it's serving.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this would probably be a good time to mention the rise of the preprint, which is something that we're very supportive of at Nature Journals. We encourage our authors to post on preprints. We're very supportive of that. But I think, sometimes the flip side is that it means that science can be, the underlying message of a paper can be misinterpreted very quickly, often because, a journalist has covered it who might not be able to appreciate the sort of finer details of the paper, and you know, before you know it, the paper's been completely misrepresented, and it's, you know, all around the world. On the other hand, I think it's really good that, you know, that is happening. I think that, you know, science should be part of the public discourse, and I think preprints can help with that. But what it does mean for us is that we have to be even more careful, you know, when we're reading our papers, when we're editing them, and, you know, talking to authors about how to position things and making sure that we're not misrepresenting papers. So, and I think that's just going to become more of an issue as we go forward. I mean, we've seen how much that's become an issue during the pandemic, of just, you know, random papers being plucked from bioRxiv and completely misrepresented.
I think also with preprints, one thing that's challenging for us as editors is, especially with, for example, COVID, and there's the massive preprints that are out there, trying to keep track of what's actually in the peer-reviewed published literature versus what's just out there and being discussed in like an article or a blog post. And the pace of, especially, you know, a year or 2 years ago, the pace of research in this area was so fast. It's really important for us to be mindful that just because we see something does not mean it's been vetted, right? And kind of evaluated by reviewers in a really rigorous way yet. Even if people are getting excited by it because it's on a preprint server, we still have to kind of follow the due diligence of what's in the literature at the time that we get a paper in order to make a decision about novelty or level of advance. So I think that is, I mean, it might be a little bit more unique to the COVID scenario right now, but certainly I think as preprints get more and more, I think we are seeing more uptake. That's my sort of sense. And I think it'll continue to spread across other fields. And so that's important for us to keep in mind, I think, because it's easy to get distracted and say like, oh, I saw this somewhere, maybe this is not so novel, but it's like, it's just being, it hasn't yet been peer reviewed. So we have to keep that in mind, and it hasn't been published formally.
I might add the social media aspects. I think I've actually seen them evolving, not that I've been that long in the journal, but in the last couple of years, this has literally exploded, and most people, like more and more people are getting involved in social media and get their information through Twitter. So you have to actually, you know, in a way, be more careful about what you're communicating, and not just as journals or journal representatives, but also the investigators themselves, but also careful about what you know, what are your sources of information? You can't just feed from Twitter and Wikipedia and expect to be fully informed. So I think, you know, I think Twitter is great, and I enjoy a lot, like the interactions I have through this platform. I would say so far it's not the, you know, the gold mine that we thought, and you know, as long as you're taking it with measure, I think it should be fun at least. Yeah, I think this is something for sure that will continue evolving. I think we're, like, as editors, we're also more involved in you know, handling accounts and disseminating contents and engaging into discussion. And I think that's a great change. So, you know, that we might add this to potential skills that are useful in editing we discussed before.
Yeah.
Although not completely required for sure.
So when we talk about especially a big discussion that I'm sure you guys have seen or been involved in terms of particularly Nature, has been this cost of publishing articles, and thinking about the effect that has on the diversity of research, whether that's the scope, the countries that research is coming from, the authors, the diversity of those authors being published. So are there any ways in which that particular issue is being tackled within your journals?
I mean, so article processing charges for open access. So open access is just happening. It's something that is just, you know, we're just facing the change. And for now, most of our journals are following the hybrid model. So it's not, you're not bound to one option or the other. You have the choice actually to go the traditional way or follow the open access route. And I think, you know, we will keep seeing how, you know, we need to track, and there's a recent study published, I don't remember the journal where it's published, but it was commented in Nature, where they're actually quantifying the extent to which this impacts the diversity. I think these numbers are really important to have, you know, in order to actually make science-based measures that can counterbalance these potential caveats. Yeah, I am not sure about like what's the global strategy to mitigate this, because we're just beginning with these things. So I think we'll continue to see this. But that's for sure something that's being kept in mind and being watched carefully, for sure.
With our journal, Nature Medicine, and I think a lot of our journals are going to be doing this or in the process of kind of formally doing this. We're trying to be, and if this is related to what you're bringing up, we're trying to be more mindful of actually tracking numbers on who's submitting papers to us, the breakdown of not just women, men, or even geographic diversity. Both of those are important variables that we would like to track, but also early career researchers versus more established researchers, which is something else I think that we should think about when we think about diversity of researchers that are submitting to our pages across our journals. And so we're in the process of starting this year, or I guess it'll be reflective of 2021, but sometime this year, kind of collating some of that data from last year. I don't know if we will be able to link everything. I guess we should be able to, in principle, link everything to open access uptake. But as Miguel said, because we're kind of all new to this as journals, we just became what's called transformative or hybrid, I guess about a year and a half ago now. It's going to take a while, I think, to see how those things relate. I think I speak for everybody, though. We are mindful of the costs of the APCs that we have. And we are, as editors, concerned about how this could impact our communities and the authors that come to us, and it could be a limitation. So I think as we get more data, and it's helpful, I should say, I think it's also helpful for authors and people who are potential authors to tell us these things, because we can speculate, we can give our own opinions, but at the end of the day, you're the readers, you're the submitters, you're the reviewers, so you can offer that direct feedback to us as well, and we can pass that along, and that's helpful for us. It's not just editors saying to our, superiors what we think is going on. So I think that there will be more data probably in the next year or two to get a better understanding of how these variables are linked.
Yeah, and I think that for all the journals across the Nature family, there have been lots of discussions about how to increase diversity of not just our authors, but also, for example, of our reviewers, and making sure that there's geographic diversity, male female, good male female split. We're always happy to have early career researchers review for us. I think the other thing I'll add to that is there are waivers for researchers from low to middle income countries as well, to help pay for the costs of the APC.
That's really good to know, actually, because I'm sure that's not well known by a lot. So good to hear, because I know that I mean, for a lot of particularly early career researchers, Nature is one of the dream journals that they could ask for their work to be in. So knowing that there are options to be able to get their work there if it's worthy of being in Nature, but just they don't have the funds to be able to do that. So I think that's really important. Additionally, if there is anybody who wants to ask questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. So we have a couple more to ask. So for those who are interested in becoming a journal editor but have no idea of where to start, what are maybe some of the first steps that they should take? What if they don't have any experience, for example? What should they think about starting to do?
Well, Saheli and I both got into, I think none of us entered editorial with any specific editorial experience, so don't let that be a barrier. Saheli and I both started our careers at Nature with locums, which come up quite regularly at the journal. They're sometimes there to cover parental leave or things like that, and they're sort of fixed term positions that really allow you to get the training in and make a decision as to whether this is the right career for you. And I could not recommend them highly enough. So just as a plug, one of our sister journals, Nature Reviews Cancer, has a locum vacancy at the moment. So if you're interested, please go have a look.
It's for 6 months. Yeah. So it's a pretty long term.
Yeah.
You'll get half a year at least of experience.
And, if you're interested in having more information about that position, then feel free to tweet the journal. I think all their editors are on Twitter, so feel free to get in touch, or we can put you in touch. So yeah, I think do that. Feel free to get in touch with editorial staff at journals. So we all have, on our web pages, there'll be an about the editor section with our email addresses. Don't be shy, get in touch, drop us an email if you
I
want.
think that was actually what tipped the balance for me. Like I actually talked to 2 established editors, and just ask for an informal, for a coffee and informal discussion, what their life is about. I was actually worried about like what were my chances of going back to academia, whether I would be able to do so or not. And they were like, no worries, nobody wants to anyway. So for me, that was like, oh well, actually, I'm talking, like they were really fully honest, and I'm really happy to discuss like the benefits and the good things, but also about the challenges or things that might be more complicated or difficult. And I think we're all happy to to talk about our life and the prospects and what is to be an editor. And I think that's if you discuss one-on-one, it's usually more helpful and more informative, probably.
Well, and one other thing to consider too, if you are, especially if you're a postdoc, but even if you're a grad student, I think asking your PI if you can co-review papers is a really nice way to learn a bit about a journal or journals that your PIs routinely review for. It's a way to get your feet kind of wet with one aspect of the peer review process. It doesn't tell you about editorial life per se, but I think it introduces you to a very critical component of editorial life, which is sort of, reading and writing reviews if you're on the peer review side. So I think that's a nice way to learn a little bit more about a journal. In addition to panels like this, that I think I did actually a lot of things like this when I was a postdoc and a grad student, just to learn about different career options. And I think it's worth taking the time. It's just as important as anything else that you're doing as a student to learn about what's out there beyond just the bench.
Awesome. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. So one of them being, some health providers have to learn writing and statistics in informal ways, and they don't see it as being formally part of kind of medical school or nursing or in postgraduate training. So those who wish to kind of formalize or strengthen their research background without undertaking a full research degree, how would they go about that?
A research background, sorry, in statistics?
So yeah, to learn like writing and stats, and I guess how to analyze or how to critically look at new publications. How do they kind of gain those skills, and if they don't have a research background in analyzing those?
So I think,
are there any particular resources or?
So if I'm, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, like for the statistical part of the papers, those are peer reviewed as well. So there's going to be advice anyways from the experts in the field, and they, stats is part of the peer review process. We also have our own stats assessment. So if there's anything that needs to be clarified or strengthened, this we'll try to guide authors in that sense. I would say it's helpful to get help from colleagues if you're not sure about if your stats are right or wrong. And same for writing. Like if you think you'll need some, I don't know, like advice from native speakers, for example, that might be helpful. I would say also from colleagues that are outside of your niche field or specific topic of your research, which can give you more advice on. I don't know if I'm getting wrong the question, but if it was in this direction, I would reach out to people that can provide help in that sense, not help you with the stats or help you with the writing or help you with the editing. But this is not something that we would, as editors, take against further consideration of any paper, for sure.
Yeah. And actually, a question more specifically for you, Miguel. In knowing that obviously Nature Cancer is a brand new journal, what work goes into starting up a brand new journal as opposed to kind of entering into one that's already established, kind of already has the impact factor, already has kind of all of that around it?
Yeah, there's obviously, an excitement of joining something that's brand new. It's like you have this tabula rasa and you can actually influence a lot on how the journal will develop, and you will actually make a dent on say, let's say, the personality of the journal. So I think that's been great. The other thing, one of the drawbacks is that, nobody knows you. So you have to get out and get to be known. So you have to do a lot of outreach, visit a lot of conferences, do a lot of lab visits, which I think it was a great part of the job. I actually liked it a lot. It's been challenging with the pandemic, so we haven't been able to do as much as we wanted to. So we've used a lot of other resources. Like we had to be a little bit handy with Twitter, with emailing a lot and doing reach out in virtual conferences, which is not as natural as when you're in person and you can just say, hey, do you want to have a coffee and discuss? So I think those were the toughest things. Regarding impact factor, I mean, there's other measures. And for example, we do a lot of measuring how our papers impact, or what is the actual impact of a paper beyond the impact factor, which takes a couple of years to develop. So for example, how many accesses we have, how many tweets, or how many people are actually downloading the paper. These things are actually, they already tell you how the journal is performing. So there's ways to actually use these metrics as well. And yeah, I mean, as I said, like we have a pretty high bar, and that was one of our, as any other Nature sister journals. So one of our challenges also was, to explain what was our bar when there weren't any papers that we could use as an example, in any area, basically. So we had to do a lot of guidance and a lot of detailed discussions with the authors, and explaining our decisions, on explaining what were the expectations for the journal. So it's, for me, as as a brand new editor, has been really enlightening. Like I've learned a lot. And I think if you go to a more established journal, probably there's processes that are more established, let's say, ways of working or ways of doing things that are more established. And here I think it was a little bit more plastic. So we have some leeway into modeling that. So I think that was, but also, like if you go to established journal, you already have the name and the brand. So it's pretty, it's, I guess it's faster to get to be known.
Yeah.
Together, you inherit a network of contacts, for example, and these kind of things that we have to build from scratch.
Yeah.
I don't know if that.
Yeah, that's a great answer to that. So actually, just a random question for you all. Actually, how many publications do you get submitted to you on a week or a monthly basis?
I feel
it's bizarrely changeable. So you can have a day where you receive 2 new submissions and another day where you receive 8 to 10. And Christmas is always quite a frantic period because I think people want to get their papers off their desks.
Right.
Summer as well.
So that's always busy. Summertime used to be busy pre-pandemic because I think people went to conferences, got inspired, all realized they were about to get scooped. And then, so summertime can be quite busy. But then in between, there are random periods of busyness or slowness, and I'm never quite sure what the patterns are.
Right. Interesting. And is it similar across all of the different journals?
Yeah, I think the waves
broadly, I think we see the same kind of waves overall, just volume of submissions, but different topics might vary a lot. I think COVID papers come in, I would argue, in kind of like there's a focal point of interest, like Omicron, and then you see a lot in that one area for like 2 weeks, and then it kind of dissipates a bit.
And as Safia said, like it varies a lot. I think a bit from weekly, anywhere from, I would say, like 10 to 15 papers a week on average, but it varies a lot, let's say. Just to give some numbers, but like if I check this week, probably it'll be totally different. So
you just jinxed yourself.
Hope not 15 this week, but okay.
No, that's awesome. It's really good to know, actually, and just to think about the number of people who are submitting and are thinking about, how to share their research and to get that to as broad an audience as possible. I think is really great. I don't think that there are any additional questions in the chat. So feel free to pop up super quick, or you're going to have to message our lovely editors later. But just a huge, huge thank you for being here, for answering all of our questions. For those that have taken the time to kind of tune in and listen and engage and ask questions and just find out what it is to be in those roles, and whether that's something that you might like to do. So I speak on behalf of Black in Cancer when I say a huge thank you to our editors, a huge thank you to the people who have joined, and we hope that you continue to engage with us, not just now, but for everything to come. And yeah, take good care of yourselves, and hopefully we'll see you at the next event.
Okay. Thank you so much for having us. It's been great.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.